Everyone at Riverside Naval Medical Center called her the Quiet One. Nurse Elena Voss, 34 years old. Always early. Always calm. Never talked about herself. Nobody knew what she used to be. Nobody knew the languages locked inside her head. German, Russian, Farsi. Nobody knew the room she used to sit in, headphones on, listening for one wrong word that could start a war. She had buried all of it, on purpose. Tonight, an admiral was coming to the hospital. A trade delegation was coming with him. German officials. A translator nobody had vetted. Elena didn't know it yet. But in 9 hours, one sentence would drag her whole past back into the light. Welcome back to Silent Heroes. If you're new here, hit subscribe, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and take a guess. What do you think Elena used to do before she became just a nurse? Now back to the story. Riverside sat on the edge of the naval base, a squat brick building that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Elena had worked there for 6 years. She moved through the halls the way she moved through everything, quiet, efficient, unremarkable. She had learned the fastest way to survive was to make herself small. She kept her hair pulled back, tight and plain. She wore the same gray cardigan over her scrubs, winter and summer. Her hands were steady, always steady, except for the smallest tremor at the base of her left thumb, the tremor she only got when she was trying too hard not to remember something. For 6 years, she had answered to the name on her badge and nothing else. Elena Voss. Not the name she'd carried before. Not the call sign that used to come through a headset at 3 in the morning. She had learned to flatten her voice, to look down instead of forward, to let people underestimate her. It was safer that way. It had always been safer that way. Dr. Marcus Reyes ran the medical wing like it was his personal kingdom. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore his ambition like cologne. You could smell it before he opened his mouth. He liked an audience. He liked being right, or at least being seen as right, and he had a particular talent for making Elena feel invisible in front of a room full of people. "Voss, charts incomplete again," he'd say, loud enough for the nurse's station to hear. "Do I need to hold your hand through basic documentation?" She never answered back. She just fixed the chart and moved on. There was one man at Riverside who saw through her, though. Old Chief Petty Officer Daniel Hobbs, a patient recovering from hip surgery, 81 years old, sharp as a blade under all that gray stubble. He watched her check his vitals one night and said, without looking up from his crossword, "You've got a soldier's hands, Nurse Voss. I've seen enough of them to know." She smiled and said nothing. But she didn't forget it. The trade delegation arrived at 0900 the next morning. A German shipping conglomerate, negotiating a joint medical supply contract with the base. Routine on paper. Admiral Grant Whitfield led the American side, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with a jaw like a closed door and 30 years of command behind his eyes. He didn't do small talk. He didn't do mistakes, either, not without consequences for whoever made them. The German delegation brought their own translator. A young man named Julian Faber, sharp suit, sharper smile, the kind of confidence that made people trust him before he'd said a word worth trusting. Elena wasn't supposed to be in that meeting at all. She was there to check on Hobbs 2 rooms down, passing the open conference door with a tray of medication when a burst of German drifted out into the hallway. She stopped. Not because it was unusual. Because it was wrong. The German representative, an older man named Herr Brandt, was speaking quickly, worried, his sentences clipped with urgency. He was talking about a shipment delay, a safety concern, a batch of medical equipment that had failed inspection. Julian Faber turned to the Admiral and said, in smooth, confident English, that Herr Brandt was simply confirming the delivery schedule was on track. That was not what he'd said. Elena's grip tightened on the tray. For 6 years she had trained herself not to react to anything. Her pulse didn't do that anymore. It wasn't supposed to do that anymore. It did it now. She stood frozen in the doorway, tray in hand, listening to a lie get repeated in a language the Admiral couldn't check. Nobody knew that Elena had spent 4 years inside a room with no windows, translating conversations where a single mistranslated word had once nearly triggered an international incident. She had left that life behind. She had told herself she would never have to use it again. The tremor in her thumb was gone. Her spine had gone straight without her noticing. Admiral Whitfield glanced up and caught her standing there a second too long. "Can I help you, nurse?" Every instinct in her told her to look down, apologize, keep walking, stay small, stay safe, stay hidden. She didn't. "Sir," she said, her voice steady in a way it hadn't been in years, "your translator just lied to you." The room went silent. The silence stretched, thin and sharp, like a wire pulled tight. Julian Faber's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. "Excuse me? I think there's a misunderstanding." "There isn't," Elena said. She set the tray down on the side table, hands steady, movements economical. "Herr Brandt said the shipment failed inspection because of a contamination risk in the sterile packaging. He said it needs to be pulled before it reaches this base. You told the Admiral it was on schedule." Herr Brandt's eyes went wide. He looked between Elena and Faber, and something in his face confirmed it before he said a word. Dr. Reyes appeared in the doorway behind her, drawn by the commotion, immediately sensing an opportunity to matter. "Nurse Voss, this is a diplomatic meeting, not the ward. I'll have to ask you to—" "Let her finish," Admiral Whitfield said, without looking at him. Reyes's mouth closed. Nobody knew that Elena had once been fluent enough in 3 languages to catch a lie by the half-second delay before it left someone's mouth. She had learned to listen for the gap between what a voice intended and what it actually said. It was a skill that didn't fade. It just went quiet. "How would you know that?" Faber said, sharper now, the confidence cracking at the edges. "You're a nurse." The word hit the room like a detonation. Not anymore, she thought, but didn't say it yet. Herr Brandt spoke again, faster, more urgent, gesturing at a folder in his briefcase. Inspection documents, dates, a supplier's name. Elena translated it clean and fast, sentence by sentence, no hesitation. Faulty seals on a batch of surgical equipment bound for the base clinic. A supplier Faber had personal financial ties to, according to Brandt. A contract Faber had pushed through despite the safety flag, because a delay would have cost him a commission. The Admiral's jaw tightened. "Is that true?" Faber said nothing. That was answer enough. "Get compliance in here," Whitfield said. "Now." Reyes, sensing the ground shifting under him, tried to reclaim the room. "Sir, with respect, Nurse Voss has no business inserting herself into a classified briefing. I'll need to report this as a serious breach of—" "She just stopped a contaminated shipment from reaching my sailors," Whitfield said. "Sit down, Doctor." Reyes sat down. It was the first time anyone had ever seen him do what he was told. By 1100 that morning, base security had the shipment flagged and held at the dock. Faber was escorted out under watch, his diplomatic status doing nothing to soften the look on the Admiral's face. Herr Brandt shook Elena's hand and thanked her twice, first in German, then again in English, like he needed her to hear it both ways. Word moved through Riverside fast. By the time Elena got back to the ward, nurses were watching her differently. Hobbs gave her a slow nod from his bed, like he'd known all along. Reyes wasn't finished, though. 2 hours later, he called her into his office and suspended her, citing unauthorized conduct in a restricted meeting. His voice was calm, controlled, but his eyes were furious, the eyes of a man who'd been made small in front of people he needed to impress. "You embarrassed me," he said. "No," Elena said. "You did that yourself." He stared at her, waiting for her to flinch. She didn't. That afternoon, a black government sedan pulled up outside Riverside. A woman in a dark suit stepped out, Colonel Ruth Adelman, Elena's former commanding officer, someone Elena hadn't seen in 6 years. She walked straight into Reyes's office without knocking, Admiral Whitfield one step behind her. You suspended one of the most decorated linguistic intelligence officers the Navy has produced in a decade, Adelman said, dropping a folder on Reyes's desk. 4 years of classified service, 2 commendations, a language aptitude score in the top 1% ever recorded at her division. She left the program on her own terms, with an honorable discharge, and she chose to spend the last 6 years taking care of people like you without ever once mentioning it. Reyes's face went pale. I didn't know. You didn't ask, Adelman said. You just assumed she was small enough to step on. The Admiral crossed his arms. The suspension is reversed, effective immediately. And Doctor, I'd think very carefully before you speak to her again. Nobody knew that Elena had spent years wondering if she'd made the wrong choice, walking away from that windowless room. Standing there, watching Reyes shrink under words that weren't even directed at her, she finally understood she hadn't lost anything. She'd just been waiting for a reason to stop hiding it. 3 weeks later, Riverside opened a new position. Director of Interpreter Services and Emergency Liaison, built specifically around Elena. It let her use both of who she was. The nurse who noticed what others missed, and the officer who could catch a lie in a language most people in the room didn't speak. Hobbs was there for the small ceremony, sitting in a wheelchair near the back, grinning like he'd won a bet with himself. Told you, he said. Soldier's hands. She squeezed his shoulder. You were the only one who said it out loud. Being underestimated doesn't mean you're small. Sometimes it just means people haven't seen the whole picture yet. The strongest people in the room are often the quiet ones, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're waiting for the moment it actually matters. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe to Silent Heroes so you never miss the next one, and tell us in the comments, what's one skill from your past you still carry with you, even if nobody around you knows it? The next story is already waiting. The end.